All right, hi guys, this is Leah. I'm going to do a mini demo today on how to paint hair because everyone's getting to that point in their portraits where that's probably going to become a question. And it is a challenge. There's a lot to think about with hair. One of the most important things I recommend always is to begin with that first color blocking layer, leaving everything really loose and general. Not thinking at all about individual hair follicles or hair pieces of hair, just large areas of dark, medium tones and light to really capture the general movement and flow of the hair, because that's easy to lose if you start right away with each individual strand. So you want to start general, work your way to specific. Usually one color blocking layer, maybe two, to fill everything in, make it thick, is best. This is only one, but I'm going to go ahead with my detail / texture layer now just to show you how it works. But preferably, I don't know if you can see some of these dark areas, they're not fully opaque yet, so I would ideally want to go into this with another layer of full color before I add my detail layer. But I'm going to show you guys how to do this. So the brushes that I'm using are also really important. These are actually Manglon brushes. Hopefully you can see these. These are made by Utrecht. The brand is here. I have sizes 2 and I guess they're both size 2. One is a round size 2, which looks a lot smaller, and this one is I believe a flat. So they are a little bit different. If you hold these flat ones on the side, you can get a pretty good line, but most of the time I'm going to end up using this. But I can use this to kind of fill in larger areas of color. These are synthetic hair, which means they're really soft and they're great for details because they don't create a scratchy look. They're very clean. So especially if you use liquid with your paint, you can get a really clean line and make it look like a strand of hair. And my colors, I mainly just have my primary palette, with the exception of alizarin crimson. I didn't see any in the painting, so I'm not going to use that, but I do have a little bit of cadmium red. And I have my medium. This is a archival lean medium that I'm going to use here today, but you guys can use your liquid. All right, so I'm going to start with black. Because I always want to start from dark to light, and I'm going to mix myself up a little black. I'm using a good amount of medium to get it nice and fluid. And then I'm going to dig into my darkest areas. I want to make sure this is stuff you guys can see. So if we have a large area of shadow, we're not going to see the texture in that area, just simply because of the light. So this particular spot, I don't see a whole lot of dark texture. I do see some light texture reaching over into it, but there are spaces where you want to allow smoothness so that there's not individual hair texture everywhere. You will have some areas where it's more visible than others. You can see in this reference photo that I have, there's a lot of really sharp light lines in the highlight areas and some in the mid-tone areas, but by no means do I see every individual strand of hair everywhere on her head. There's a lot of areas that get a little bit washy and harder to see, and those areas you can allow to be looser in your painting. But I do like to kind of start by blocking in dark areas that I know I can't see as much texture. Because I can always kind of come in between these areas with more straightforward hair texture. Okay, here is where I'm starting to use the side of my brush and starting to kind of get into the crevices of each individual hair follicle. I have a lot of what will be individual strands showing through in this spot, so I don't want to get too thick under there. I don't need to get too dark either, but it's fine if you use a little bit more dark than you need because you will be covering things up. All right, that's probably enough for now. Okay, so now my next step is going to be to mix a slightly lighter tone, one of the darker mid-tone colors, which has a good amount of brown in it. So I'll start with burnt umber, and a little bit of cadmium red, a little bit of cadmium yellow, but not much. Keep it fairly dark, and then a bit of medium to loosen that up. All right, and now I'm going to just look for where I see that color in my photograph. A lot of times the next darkest or next lightest color will come right next to the darkest color, the black. And I'm starting to use my hair texture here. If you need to get it looser, you can add a little bit more liquid. I should also show you guys, there are instances where you may want to use the black a little bit more for individual hair shapes. But either way, you always want to start with your dark and move your way towards the light. I'll start kind of suggesting the direction of the hair movement. It's important for this that I see that it's rounded in this direction. And as it goes this way, it's falling that way. But allow your hand to kind of like lift off the canvas and move in sort of a natural, flowy type way, because the hair is a very natural element that can get very controlled and patterny if you're too tight with it. So be sure to loosen up a little bit and let yourself just mainly try to understand the general motions and shapes created by the hair, and always be using your strokes in a way that accentuates that. She's a little bit reddish towards the roots here, mainly because of the shadow on her skin, which creates kind of an orangey color. So I'm keeping that in mind. That's why I'm using this color down here. Alright, so I'm going to lighten up this color, move to my next value. Don't want to jump too high yet, so I'm just adding a little bit of cadmium yellow, because there's a good amount of that type of color in here. And you want to remember that the combination of these colors is what's going to create her hair color. If she has blonde hair, you wouldn't mix up one color, just like the skin tone, you wouldn't mix up one color and expect that to give us the right effect. There's a sheen to it. So she has a little bit of reds in there, browns, some kind of bluer, greenish blonde colors in the shadows, because blue exists in the shadows. And it's the combination of all of these various colors that create the sheen that is her hair, and this kind of shiny effect. Same thing if you're trying to paint something metallic. It's not really about you don't have to use a metallic paint to paint something as if it's metallic. You can just use that really careful observation of color and value shift, and the more accurately you can portray that, the more it will appear to be that texture, that metallic texture. Here I can kind of start laying in some hair textures, but also if you see shapes that are broader, again, that aren't necessarily showing texture, you can paint those in as well. I see a little bit of this here. But yeah, that color blocking layer of mine is super dull, so a lot of this next texture layer and layer of coverage will be meant to lighten all of that up and make it a bit more vibrant. Okay, trying to go one step lighter using white, but again, I don't want to get too crazy and go bright white quite yet. So this color actually looks pretty good to me. I see a lot of colors in there, most definitely. Okay, kind of lay these across the highlights a little bit. You can kind of blend out some of your hair textures as you go. You, again, don't want to get too overly textured because then it'll be a bit distracting. You want the face to still be a focal point, and you want to be able to enjoy the texture when you get up there to look at it, but you don't want to necessarily overwhelm either. Here I'm using the thick end of this brush and kind of getting the sense of the arch that's happening with this section of the hair. Kind of trying to blend that out a little bit because I don't need it super clear and crisp until the bright highlight. The bright highlights in the hair are one of the most important moments. The building is very important from dark to light, but really nailing the color and the shape of those brightest blonde highlights are going to be very important for us. And down that way. So you guys get the idea. I'm kind of moving a little quickly because I'm going to have to get to editing this, and I don't know how long that's going to take. But if anybody has any questions at all, let me know after you watch this. It's definitely a tricky thing, and it'll take a little practice to kind of get the hang of things. But don't worry, I really have faith in you guys. Okay, so see how I'm like starting to pull that lighter color deeper over into the darker color? That is what really gives me the sense of individual hair strands. And again, that's what you want to have exist in several places, but you don't want it to be everywhere because it will be too distracting if it's everywhere. Okay, so I'm going to take my tiniest brush with a lot of medium, a lot more white, and then also I'm going to bump up a little bit of lemon yellow in there, kind of a cool yellow, but I want a bright yellowy color. It's very close to white though. I don't want to go too yellow, I guess. All right. And now see this section right here is kind of one that I'm focusing on. So I'm gonna take that across there and be very gentle. Make sure you got enough paint on your brush every time you go. All right. And then a couple of these may follow into those medium tones that I laid down there, okay? And there may be a few colors that kind of stray and go right over top of a dark shadow. Look for those areas too. Looking for areas where those highlights overlap each other and become really luminescent. This is one such area, so I'm starting to overlay my brush strokes a little bit more, allow it to kind of become a solid shape made out of all of those individual strands. And I might have a few pieces coming in here. And you certainly can allow this to dry and then do some light strokes over top. One thing that will come up, you know, that's pretty much what I wanted to show you guys with the highlights. Could go a little bit longer, but I don't want to make this too long. So I'm going to go back to my dark color up here and show you what I would do at the edges also. These colors are very dark up here, but it is a little bit more kind of gray toned at the edge. All right, so we can see how some of the hair kind of overlaps. So you don't want to go crazy again, like I mentioned, but like let some of them be loose. I like to start out by just looking for the most important motions. We want to get the sense that there's a thinness and we're seeing it kind of wrap around. And you also don't want a hard edge on the hair. This kind of exists to help soften that turn, and it helps to make it feel more rounded, okay? And you may, if the hair is more curly or more wild, you may have little wispies that kind of come out further, like that, or that don't even connect to the head. Maybe they're like there. So depending on your reference image, it may be a little different, but this is a good example of how hair can be painted with oil paint. All right, good luck, guys. I have all the confidence in the world in you, but I hope this helps, and feel free to let me know if you have any questions.